Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookercast, the podcast where books come to life.
And I'm so excited to dive into another amazing story with all of you.
Whether you're a bookworm or just love a good story, this is the place for you.
Every episode, we explore incredible books, talk about their stories and characters, and share insights that'll make you fall in love with reading all over again.
All right, let's not keep you waiting any longer. Get comfortable, and let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a world of, well, shadows and secrets this time, with The Shadow of the Wind. You guys know how much we love to unpack these complex narratives, and this one, it seems like it really resonated with a lot of you.
Yeah, it's a book that stays with you, that's for sure. It's not just a mystery, though. There's plenty of that. It's like a love letter to stories themselves, to the way they get woven into our lives.
Right. That Cemetery of Forgotten Books, it's practically its own character, isn't it?
Exactly. It's this incredible metaphor. Like all those forgotten books are like forgotten memories or something, waiting to be rediscovered.
And speaking of rediscovering, let's set the stage a bit for anyone who hasn't had the pleasure of getting lost in the shadow of the wind yet. What's the core of this intricate story?
All right, so picture this. Post-Spanish Civil War Barcelona. A young boy, Daniel Semper, he stumbles upon this hidden book, The Shadow of the Wind, it's called.
Okay, already sounds intriguing. A hidden book in a city full of secrets. Go on.
And he's captivated, right? He wants more of this author's work, Julián Carax. But there's this unsettling feeling that someone's trying to erase Carax completely.
Ooh, like a literary ghost hunt almost.
Yeah.
I gotta ask, what do you think Zafón is doing with that whole, deliberate forgetting element? It's kind of creepy, but there's got to be more to it.
Right. I think it makes you think about, censorship, who controls the narrative. Especially in that time period, post-war Spain, freedom of expression wasn't exactly flourishing. Makes you wonder if Carax is just forgotten or, actively silenced.
Whoa. Yeah, adds a whole other layer, doesn't it? And this book, it's got layers upon layers. We're talking Gothic vibes, romance, mystery, heck, even a touch of the supernatural.
Zafón was a master at blending those genres, creating this atmosphere that just pulls you in. The Gothic stuff is definitely there, the shadowy setting, the secrets, the kind of, decay lurking beneath the surface of things.
But it's not all doom and gloom, right? There's this tenderness, too, the way love is explored. Daniel's loss with his mother, his relationships, and then Carax's own love story within the book he finds.
Yeah. And through all those relationships, you really see how memory plays a role, how the past, personal and collective, shapes who we are, how we deal with loss.
That scene in the crypt always gets to me, where Daniel can't even picture his mother's face anymore. It's so heartbreaking, but it speaks to that fragility of memory.
It does. But even with all the sadness, there's this glimmer of hope in how the characters connect through books.
Like literature's this lifeline.
Yeah.
Bridging the gap between what was and what is, helping to make sense of it all.
Exactly. And speaking of beautiful things, have we talked about Zafón's writing itself? The way he describes Barcelona.
It's like you're right there in those winding streets, those dusty bookshops. Almost cinematic.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just the imagery, it's the rhythm of his sentences, how he weaves everything together, the storylines, the different points of view.
And the characters, even with all their flaws and secrets, they feel so real. You can't help but get invested.
That's the mark of a great storyteller, isn't it? He makes these characters complex, nuanced. You learn about them gradually through what they do, how they interact.
And Daniel, we see him grow throughout the whole thing. Starts as this kind of naive kid, pulled into this web of intrigue, and by the end, he's faced some serious stuff, learned some hard truths.
He kind of embodies the reader's journey too, right? We're figuring things out alongside him, getting pulled deeper into the mystery, those enigmatic characters facing the shadows of the past.
And let's not forget those supporting characters. Each one plays such a specific role, like they're adding pieces to the puzzle.
Absolutely. You've got Fermin, this loyal, almost father figure to Daniel, and Nuria Montfort. She's a whole enigma herself, but holds so many keys to what happened to Carax.
Oh, I love Fermin. He brings such warmth and humor to the story,
Ever.
especially when things get, kind of dark.
He's a gem. But even he, with all that wit, has his own past, the scars of the war. It shows you how even the most lighthearted folks carry their own burdens, you know?
Right. And his thing with Bernarda, the housekeeper, it's like a testament to how love can find a way, even in the toughest situations.
For sure. There's that potential for kindness and compassion, even when everything seems bleak. It shines through.
So we've covered setting, characters, Zafón's insane writing style. But what about plot, what moments really stick out to you, like those turning points that shift everything?
Well, Daniel finding the shadow of the wind in the first place, obviously. It sets the whole chain of events in motion, his obsession with Carax, the path he ends up on. It's like he stepped into another world, right?
Yeah.
Through this magical doorway of a book. You just know nothing will ever be the same for him after that.
Exactly. And then there's that first meeting with Inspector Fumero. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. You get the sense right away that he's bad news. Oh, Fumero. He's straight out of a nightmare, like this embodiment of everything cruel and corrupt in post-war Barcelona, a shadow hanging over Daniel, threatening everything he cares about.
And the more we learn about his connection to Carax, the more layers get added to the mystery. It's not just about a forgotten author anymore. It's like this act of suppression tied to the city's dark history.
Yeah, and speaking of dark history, the Spanish Civil War looms over the whole novel, right? It's not just some background event. It's like an open wound that still affects everything and everyone.
Absolutely. The city, the people, they all carry the scars, physical and emotional. There's this constant sense of loss, betrayal. Like there are secrets buried everywhere.
Makes you wonder how anyone moves on from something so traumatic. But then you see this resilience too, this desire to rebuild, to find hope even in the ruins.
It's incredibly powerful. That human spirit, our ability to survive, adapt. You see it in Daniel's journey as he's trying to understand his own past, find his place in this world that's still reeling from the war.
You know what else I noticed? This theme of duality, like light and shadow, love and loss, truth and lies. It's like walking a tightrope, trying to find balance.
That's central to what Zafón's exploring. It's about human experience, those opposing forces that shape who we are, the choices we make. And sometimes it's in the shadows that we find the most profound truths.
Speaking of shadows, that cemetery of forgotten books, man, it's more than just a place, right? It's like this loaded symbol.
Totally. It's all those lost stories, those voices that could be forgotten. It's about remembering, holding on to those pieces of the past that help us make sense of the present.
And that ritual, choosing a book from the cemetery, is almost like adopting it, taking on the responsibility of making sure that story isn't forgotten.
Such a beautiful way to think about reading. It's not just words on a page, it's engaging with those lives, those dreams, keeping them alive.
And making sure their voices keep echoing, that they don't get lost in the shadows.
Ex-
You know, it's amazing how Zafón makes Barcelona more than just a backdrop. It's like breathing, pulsing alongside the characters, full of those secrets we were just talking about.
Totally. The city's like its own character. Yeah, all the architecture, its history, even the atmosphere, it's all intertwined with how the characters feel, what they're going through. Like, think about the Ravel Quarter, how it's described, all dark and run down, kind of mirrors the hidden stuff Daniel's uncovering.
Oh, for sure. I get chills every time I read that line. Barcelona is a city of echoes, a city of phantoms. It's like the past is always there, whispering.
It really is. And it's not just the buildings or the streets, it's the way people interact. Those unspoken rules, that lingering distrust from the war, Zafón captures it perfectly.
It makes you realize how war doesn't just end when the fighting stops. The effects linger in people, in the very soul of a place.
Exactly. And that feeling that something's hidden, not quite right, that's pure Gothic, isn't it? Zafón uses those elements so well, building the suspense, that atmosphere that keeps you hooked.
Speaking of suspense, let's get into the mystery itself. We've got shadowy figures, clues in old books, and of course that big question. What happened to Julián Carax?
Yeah, the Carax mystery is the engine of the whole story. Daniel's need to know, to uncover the truth, it takes him to some dangerous places.
But it's not a simple whodunit, right? There's so much more going on, different storylines weaving in and out. Keeps you guessing the whole time.
Zafón's a master at creating uncertainty. You never know who to trust, what's real, what's a lie, if you're about to walk into danger.
There's this constant unease, like waiting for the other shoe to drop, and then having those multiple narrators, it adds another layer, doesn't it? Each one with their own slant on things.
Or for sure, it makes you question everything you read. You're piecing the puzzle together right alongside Daniel. And just when you think you've got it, Zafón throws in a twist. You got to reevaluate everything.
It's like stumbling through a maze in the dark. You take one step forward, and there's another twist, another mystery.
That's a great analogy. And it's how the characters feel too, right? Lost in this world of secrets, lies, trying to grasp that elusive truth.
And sometimes the biggest lies are the ones we tell ourselves, aren't they?
That's deep. And yeah, the book explores that self-deception, how we avoid those uncomfortable truths just to protect ourselves, our own image of who we are.
Like Daniel's father, right? Clinging to this romanticized past, unable to face the pain, the guilt.
Or the Aldaya family, all proper and respectable on the surface, but underneath, it's all crumbling, full of dark secrets.
Makes you think everyone's got something to hide. And sometimes the people you think you know best are the ones with the biggest bombshells.
And it's often through stories, those bits and pieces of the past, that the truth gets revealed. That's what The Shadow of the Wind does so well.
It's like it celebrates how stories can shine a light into the darkness, give us comfort, connect us in a world that feels like it's falling apart.
And it reminds us that even with all the bad stuff, the loss, the betrayals, the weight of history, there's still room for redemption, for finding beauty and meaning, even in the most unexpected places.
We've talked a lot about the Gothic side, but the romance is a big part of it too. Adds a whole other layer.
Yeah, love in The Shadow of the Wind is just as complex as the city itself. You got Julian and Penelope, their love story, so passionate, but doomed. Crossing all those societal lines, ending in tragedy.
The classic Gothic romance, right?
Yeah.
Intrigue, passion, that sense that something terrible is going to happen. Those secret meetings, stealing those moments of happiness. It breaks your heart.
And their love story casts such a long shadow. You see how it affects everything that happens later. Proof that the past never really stays buried, you know?
Yeah.
The choices we make, they ripple out even across generations.
And then you've got Daniel figuring out love and loss for himself. His crush on Clara, the bookseller's niece, it introduces him to the power of reading, but also heartbreak. First love, never easy.
It's such a sweet, sad exploration of what it's like to be young and in love. And Clara being blind, it adds a whole other dimension, doesn't it? Her vulnerability, but also this different way of seeing the world.
And then there's Nuria Montfort.
Mm.
She's like a force of nature,
Mm.
beautiful, mysterious, dangerous even.
Nuria is incredible. Smart, tough, but carrying so much hurt. Her love for Daniel, it's real, but there's also that fear of getting hurt again, you know?
Their scenes together are intense. The chemistry, the secrets they share. It creates this bond that's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
She's more than just a love interest, though. Nuria is a key to understanding what happened to Carax. She was there, saw it all, and she helps Daniel, even though it puts her at risk. It shows her goodness, her need to set things right.
Right. And we can't forget Bea, Daniel's friend from childhood. She's like this anchor, always there for him.
Bea represents that steady, dependable love. Loyalty, always ready to listen her. She balances out those more fiery, complicated relationships.
It's cool how Zafón shows all these different ways to love, how they can make life better, but also mess things up pretty good.
And how they stick with us, shape who we are, even after the initial passion fades.
Speaking of things that stick with us, those symbols Zafón uses. We talked about the cemetery, but fire pops up a lot too, doesn't it? Like literally and figuratively.
Good catch. Fire's big in The Shadow of the Wind. It's destruction, but also purification, like burning Carax's books. It's an attempt to silence him, wipe him out completely.
It's scary, right? How easily knowledge, stories can be destroyed. But there's also that idea that fire can clear the way for something new.
Right. There's that scene where Daniel and Fermín are caught in a fire, and it's almost like a baptism. They come out changed, ready for whatever comes next.
Wow, yeah, it's like sometimes you got to go through something terrible to rebuild, to find yourself in the ashes.
Exactly. It shows how strong we can be, how even when we lose so much, we can still come out stronger, more determined to honor the people we've lost.
And then there's the labyrinth. Literally, with the streets of Barcelona, the cemetery's hidden passages, but also figuratively, with how the plot unfolds.
The labyrinth is perfect for this book. It's life, right? Searching for truth, trying to find your way when everything feels confusing, dangerous.
It says a lot about how it's not always about the destination. Sometimes the most important stuff happens along the way, when you're lost, following your gut, your curiosity.
And being okay with not knowing, getting lost sometimes, that's how you really find yourself.
Man, there's so much to unpack with this book. But I gotta ask, what really grabs you? What keeps bringing you back to The Shadow of the Wind?
Honestly, it's how Zafón blends everything so seamlessly. The history, the mystery, the romance, the philosophical stuff. It makes you think, but it also pulls you in emotionally.
Totally. It's not just an intellectual exercise. You connect with the characters, their struggles, their joys, their heartbreaks.
It's a story that speaks to your head and your heart. And it reminds you how powerful stories are. They bring us together, comfort us, challenge us, they change us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, before we wrap up this part, a question for everyone listening. If you could step into the cemetery of forgotten books, what one book would you choose to rescue? That one story you wouldn't want the world to lose. That's a tough one. So many amazing books out there. But yeah, it really makes you think about what stories matter most. And speaking of things that matter, let's go back to Love and Memory and The Shadow of the Wind. They're kind of inseparable, aren't they?
For sure. Memory drives so much of the story. It shapes who the characters are, but it also affects the whole vibe of Barcelona. Like Daniel trying to remember his mother's face, that emptiness he feels. It fuels his obsession with Carax, his need to connect with the past.
It's like he's searching for those missing memories through Carax's story, trying to fill that void, you know?
Exactly. And memory is not just a personal thing in this book. The city itself remembers the Spanish Civil War. That collective trauma, it's still there, haunting everyone.
You can feel it everywhere. Those crumbling buildings, the way people are so guarded, the fear that lingers beneath the surface.
And it's against that backdrop, all that shared memory and loss, that the love stories unfold. You've got Julian and Penelope, their love so intense, but destined to fail. They push against the rules, but it ends tragically.
There are stories like a warning. How secrets can destroy, how society can crush even the strongest love.
But it also shows how love can last, even when it's impossible. How it transcends time, leaves its mark, even if it's brief.
And Daniel's journey with love is so different. His thing for Clara, she opens up this whole world of reading for him, but it's also his first taste of heartbreak. Unrequited love, ouch.
Clara represents this pure, innocent love, but there's a sadness to it, too. And her being blind, it adds this whole other level. Her vulnerability, but also this unique perspective she has.
And then you've got Maria Montfort. She's just magnetic, smart, beautiful, but there's an edge to her.
Maria's had a tough life. She's careful with love, guarded. But her feelings for Daniel, they're real.
The sparks fly between them. It's all that chemistry, the secrets they share, this bond that's exhilarating and a little scary at the same time.
She's not just a love interest, though. Naria's essential to the mystery. She knows what happened to Carax. She was there. And she helps Daniel even when it's risky. That says a lot about her character.
And B, Daniel's childhood friend. She's like a steady presence in his life.
B represents that strong, reliable love. She's loyal, always there to listen. A good balance to those more intense, chaotic relationships.
Zafón really shows how multifaceted love can be. The way it can enrich our lives, but also make things complicated.
And how it stays with us influences who we become long after the initial spark is gone.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about how impactful literature is in The Shadow of the Wind. It's not just in the background, it's like the heart of the story.
Exactly. Zafón shows how transformative reading can be. It can take you to other worlds, comfort you, make you question things, connect you to something bigger.
The Cemetery of Forgotten Books, it embodies that, doesn't it? It's a place for those lost stories, shows how fragile knowledge is, reminds us to hold on to the voices from the past.
And that whole thing about choosing a book from the cemetery, it becomes this ritual. You're showing respect, promising to keep that story alive, acknowledging the power it has.
It's like every book is a portal
Wow.
to a different time, place, a whole other life. And when we read, we're not just taking in words. We're having this conversation with the past. We're connecting with those hopes, dreams, even fears.
And through those conversations, we can learn about ourselves, where we fit in, the power of stories to shape us.
You know, one of the biggest takeaways from The Shadow of the Wind is that stories have this incredible ability to transcend. They can outlive everything. Their authors, their critics. They can speak to people generations later.
That's so true, and that's why it's so important to treasure the stories that move us, to share them, make sure they're not forgotten. There's that great line Zafón wrote, "Every book, every volume you see here has a soul. The soul of the person who wrote it and of those who read it and lived and dreamed with it. Every time a book changes hands, every time someone runs his eyes down its pages, its spirit grows and strengthens."
It gives me chills. It's such a beautiful way to describe the power of books. And it reminds us that as readers, we have this responsibility to keep those stories alive, to engage with them, share our own interpretations.
And by doing that, we become part of this bigger conversation across time and space, connecting with all the readers who found comfort, inspiration, a sense of belonging in those pages.
Well, folks, that's about all the time we have for our deep dive into The Shadow of the Wind. I hope this has given you some fresh perspectives, or maybe even made you want to pick it up for the first time.
It's a book that keeps on giving. Every time you read it, you find something new, some deeper meaning. It makes you think about love, memory, the magic of storytelling.
And before we go, something to ponder. What stories are you carrying with you? Those books that changed you, left their mark. Think about those stories, maybe even revisit them. Let them keep speaking to you.
And if you're looking for your next literary escape, I can't recommend The Shadow of the Wind enough. Get ready to get lost in its world, find those hidden gems, and come out the other side changed for the better.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, everyone. Happy reading, and we'll see you next time.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Bookercast. We hope you enjoyed diving into it as much as we did. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on this episode.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this episode with your fellow book lovers. And let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. See you in the next deep dive. Bye for now, and happy reading.